Live streaming is on.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the April meeting. April Fool's Day today. Hopefully everyone will behave themselves because I'm too dumb to realize most japes, so I prefer that people just leave me alone. Um, but yeah, let's do what we normally do. We are very excited to have Ed Comer today for the first time in a little while, and he did say he had another thing going on. So let's talk to Ed.
Oh, well, I don't have much to talk about. The only thing I've done Linux lately is about 2 hours ago, I upgraded my Manjaro system here. I don't, as far as I know, everything works, but I'm very leery. I use KiCad for printed circuit board design, and it upgraded me to version 7, which I hear has a bunch of bugs in it. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I haven't tested that yet. Later today. But nothing true Linux going on. Just using Linux, not and upgrading it, but not everything is stable. So that's
Yeah,
good.
well, that's what it's for, to use it, right? Have you done anything in your maker realm?
Well, I'm still making printed circuit boards mostly for a commercial project of my son-in-law. So he's going through a major redesign. I think I'm making my 4th board for him, but he's not finished with that yet. Then I'll have to sit down and do some radical design changes.
Whatever happened to your beehive project?
I moved to South Carolina away from the beehive person I was working with.
Okay.
Hey, everything changes when you move.
All right, is that all for you, Ed?
That's all for me. Like I say, not much true Linux stuff, just using it.
Yeah. Well, as always, we don't have to stick to Linux. We spend our time however we want.
Well, I'll be glad to talk about KiCad and printed circuit board manufacturing, but you probably don't want to.
Why not?
You may be surprised. Well, let's move on to Larry. What you got going on, Larry?
I don't have really much Linux. I was wondering about Pete was saying he has a self-driving car that looks for a white line and a yellow line. What happens in rain? Like today, I drove over an hour and I couldn't really see lines. I could see 2 red lights in front of me.
If it's really cloudy or foggy, this thing comes up. It's got like a computer screen in the middle of the dash, and it pops up foresight disabled or something, and it beeps. And you better grab the steering wheel quick because it can't see anything. So it gives you a heads up, but that can be an issue, especially when I'm up on top of my mountain at 4,000 feet. It can get really foggy up there. And it doesn't do very well on dirt roads either. No lines.
So it has to be paved and good weather conditions, basically.
Yep.
One
little gotcha is when you come to an exit on the interstate, the lines on the right go away usually, and then it'll beep at you also because it doesn't see a line. Sometimes it'll follow the center line, but it somehow it knows, like if it's 2-lane, it's a 4-lane interstate or more, it knows which lane you're in. If you're in the right-hand lane, it knows that. And if the right-hand line goes away because there's a exit, it gets confused and it'll beep at you and say, "Take over steering."
So are these newer vehicles supposed to be safer than older vehicles? I mean, one lady that lives up the road from me drives a fairly new vehicle, and she backed down the road and backed into a tree right at my driveway. And I thought a lot of these newer vehicles will beep whenever you're going to run into something.
And, I think they do.
But evidently some of them don't do that. And then this man here had a 2020 Jeep, I think, and he went off into a creek and died in the accident. I mean, gets no warning. I mean, when you're this was at night and in rain too. So I just wonder about, things are supposedly safer. When we were growing up, we were in a car as children with no seat belts. Now everybody's supposed to wear seat belts. And I thought cars were, self-driving. Is it really safer?
Oh.
Well, you're balancing safety and convenience there. I don't know if.
I find it really is great when you go on a long distance trip, like from Florida to Asheville or Asheville to Vermont. You get in the right-hand lane, you set the speed limit to whatever it is, 65, 70, and it just keeps moving along. And if there's a car ahead of you going slow and it comes up, it'll slow itself down, back off. If that guy's off the highway, it'll speed up to the speed that you set. And it makes it quite easy to do long distance driving.
Will it pass automatically if there's a slower car in front?
No, it'll just slow down and back off from it.
What kind of car do you have?
Volkswagen Atlas.
Hmm.
Oh, it's also very heavy, weighs about 5,500 pounds. So on the highway, it's really smooth. It's a real good long distance trip car.
There is one sort of Linux thing. It's not really Linux, but we have this Linux furnace. And since Ed is here, I was going to talk about hardware a little bit. And it has a electric motor in it. Well, it's got two motors in it. One of them is the burner motor, and it's now stopped turning. It just hums and doesn't spin anymore. It's over 50 years old. And
What's this in? What's it in, Larry?
It's in a furnace, a Linux furnace. It's the burner motor. It has two functions. It sucks in air, so it has a cage like a fan that sucks in air and blows it into the burner over the fuel. And it also turns a fuel pump with a belt to pump fuel in. And so turns out I've found the specs on it. If you look it up online, it's an OPH 30C oil burner. There's a lot of information about it. And it turns out it's what's called a centrifugal motor, which I'd never heard of, but as it spins, it has a mechanical switch in it. And when it gets up to a certain speed, the start winding inside the motor, evidently there's a run winding and a start winding to get the motor spinning. Start winding becomes disengaged. So if the start winding, for example, is disconnected, it won't start. It'll just sit there and hum. So that's what I think is the problem. So anyway, I've been reading about motors online, electric motors. They've evidently evolved quite a bit over the past 50 years that I didn't know about. And like another one that I have is doing the same kind of thing. It's one of the children's toys. It's like a 300 or 400 watt, 3 or 4 amp motor for a bouncy house. Is a blower motor, and it does that too. But it's got a capacitor. So evidently, a lot of electric motors have a capacitor that's forced in series with the start winding. So it gives you two magnetic fields that are out of phase to make the thing turn to get started. And then I've been reading even more about, there's some of them that have a capacitor in there that's permanent. Some of them have two capacitors, a run capacitor and a start capacitor. And then other motors, I think maybe newer, I'm not sure, different kind of motor will just have a single capacitor in series with the winding on what they call it a start capacitor. I don't know whether you really call it a start capacitor. It'll have two windings in the motor, and that one winding will have a start capacitor in series with it to make a magnetic field that's out of phase with the other magnetic field, or what's called a single phase motor, single phase power supply. And then these motors are used in a lot of different things, like ceiling fans and dehumidifiers and refrigerators and heating systems, air conditioning. They all use electric fans. But like I said, it seems like they've been evolving a lot since I've fooled with fans, like about when I was growing up years and years ago, or fooled with electric motors. So I've been trying to understand what's going on. There's even something newer than these. They're called permanent split phase electric motor. There's even a newer version that they claim is better than that lasts longer and so forth. But I was trying to figure out what's going on with these things and what's going on with the capacitors. Supposedly the capacitors it's a lot of the capacitors are like in refrigerators. They have these long cylindrical capacitors. It's not an electrolytic capacitor. It's not a polarized capacitor. It's used for AC voltage or current going through it. But this one happens to be square or more rectangular shape, and it fits in a small place, so you can't really put in another one. I don't know. Ed is the main person here that I know who knows a lot about hardware, and I thought maybe he could chime in if he knew anything about these motors. I'm trying to understand them.
No, Larry, I'm not a motor guy.
You're not a motor guy?
No.
I wouldn't consider myself a motor guy either, but the circuits are extremely simple. It's just an inductor and a capacitor usually. Maybe a switch on this very, very old Linux furnace motor. Anyway, that's what I have to say about Linux. So I'll let you.
Different kind of Linux, Larry. That's LED and NOx.
Furnace. So,
Larry, does that motor have a centrifugal governor?
I don't think it's long before the days of a smart motor. Everything nowadays is smart. It's got electronics in it.
Oh,
Now, I don't know that I want to replace a 50-year-old furnace with a smart furnace and smart everything. The smart stuff can be a lot of trouble too. So, and we might be able to, there's a YouTube video where this furnace guy took a oil burner motor apart and cleaned out the switch inside it, the centrifugal switch, and the motor started working again. So I may do that.
I've done that on my heat pump. I have a starter cap and a switch to take the starter cap out once it gets up to speed. And I had to replace the cap. I also had to clean the contacts on that relay, and then eventually I had to replace the relay.
Yeah, this may have to replace. I think you can get these centrifugal switches that are inside the motor and replace it.
That's a good question.
I think you can, even for a 50-year-old motor. They seem to be available online.
Really? Wow, that's a miracle.
Larry, they do make hamster upgrades too for those.
But you got to feed them.
Yeah, you got to feed them.
Well, this furnace, is like 50 years old, and this cage, it's the fan that sucks the air in, was just caked with dust and dirt. So it obviously needed to be cleaned out too, taken apart, which hasn't been done for 50 years.
Where do you put the coal in?
It's oil. It has a pump that pumps oil out of a tank.
Okay.
Larry, might be what's called upgrade time.
Really?
I know, I agree, but so we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's it for me right now.
Well, thank you so much, Larry. We heard a bit from Dan there. So Dan, what you got going on?
Well, I don't have a lot about Linux this month. I spent mine last month when I spent 50 minutes talking about what I was doing. I couldn't believe I talked as long as I did. But Brent cut me off, so that's good.
This week we may need some extra help. So
Yeah. But
let her loose.
yeah, let her loose. I don't have a lot. I mean, I guess the only thing I've done Linux wise between this last month and this month is I installed Zorin OS Linux on 2 of my laptops. It has resurrected one of my older laptops, which is a Dell Latitude 6400 business laptop. It's about 15 years old, that laptop, and at least 12. So, and now it's like a new machine, which Zorin is. Zorin, I don't know if anybody's used it, but Zorin OS is supposed to be good for people who are coming from a Windows environment because it makes your Linux environment look like Windows, and it does. But it just it has low CPU usage, low memory usage, and it just makes the machine like a new machine. So I'm real happy with it. And then on the new laptop, which is an Asus Aspire laptop, it's Acer rather, not Asus. Acer Aspire laptop. It just clicks right along. So it's got 12 gigs of RAM in it. And so it's happy with Zorin OS on it. So that's what I've been doing Linux wise. Other than that, but the only thing I've been keeping myself occupied with quite a bit actually is I've been using a product. It's not open source. It is proprietary, but it's free to use if you're not commercially using it. And it started out as a note-taking application, and now it's a personal knowledge management, very much so a personal knowledge management tool called Obsidian. I don't know if anybody has used it. Anybody else used it out there?
I've heard of it. I never used it.
Well, check it out, Pete, because it is a bomb. I mean, Obsidian is really growing. A year and a half ago, when I first looked at Obsidian, there were probably only like 250 plugins to it. Now there's over 1,000 plugins.
Wow.
Community plugins to the thing. And there's a new CEO named Capano. His name is Steven something. I can't remember. I can never remember his last name. He's a new.
Jobs.
No, it's not Jobs.
No.
But he's a new CEO, young guy for Obsidian, and he's probably got the most acceptable and famous, I guess, plugin that's out there right now for the community, and everybody loves it. So he's a good thing for the company right now. But what I've done with it, I've recently set up a book database and using DataView, which is a plugin for it, and it's a wonderful thing. I've got like 33 books I've read, and books I want to read, and it keeps track of all of those. It does a bunch of stuff. No, I won't get into it anymore, but I want to bore you. But I really like it. One of the things I have done that I will mention is I've went and acquired an API key for GPT-4, not GPT-3, but GPT-4. And so I'm going to start using that. I've got 1 month of credit on it, worth $18. And so I'm going to go ahead and start using that. And it integrates into Obsidian so that you can, when you create a note, you can ask OpenAI, GPT-4, to either questions or write things or whatever, and does it, seamlessly in the background. So I'll be checking that out. Probably report about that next month.
Do
yeah.
you run into any issues with UEFI installing this new stuff on old computers?
No, I haven't.
It's supported?
It's supported, yeah.
Okay,
I haven't had any trouble at all.
that's great.
Yep. But anyway, that's about it for me. I haven't really got much else to report about.
I expected more. You're gonna have to step it up.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't do 50 minutes this month.
we'll see what we can do. My wife told me I got to get out the door, right at 2 at the latest. So
Well, I do have one.
it may work. Oh,
I do have one other thing I wanted to mention. This is good news. I guess our website for YouTube, which is the Western North Carolina Linux Users Group YouTube group channel, it's been in operation now for close to 3 years, I think, since I put it up. And we've always had 69 subscribers, never advanced beyond that in 2.5 years. Well, we did it last month. We went up to 71. Woo. But we did get 2 more subscribers on board. So I was happy to see that change. It's at least an upward position. At least we didn't have people go out. That's all I got. But
yep. Thanks again. Pete, what you got going on down in Florida?
I have an interesting situation. I'm still struggling along with my Mint 19, which I had made a DVD of it whenever it came out, and I would like to get updated to 21.1 Mint. Anyway, the situation is my internet connection is really slow, both up on the mountain and down here. I'm running between roughly 5 megabits per second, and I believe the download on Mate 21.1 is 2 point something gigabytes. So I'm wondering if there's any recommendations on how to handle that. It used to be you could buy a install CD for $5 or $10 online. I don't see them anymore. Like Red Hat had them and some of the other companies. So then I was thinking, well, maybe I could do some war driving, where you drive down the road with your laptop and you look for a nice fast internet connection that is either unprotected or you can guess the password. That was one thing. And then another was go to a Wi-Fi hotspot. I didn't know the ins and outs of that as far as a 2 gig download over a Wi-Fi hotspot, whether that would go well or not. Anybody got any thoughts on that?
yeah, Pete, I got a solution for you.
Yeah.
If you want to send me your address in an email to me, I will download that for you, put it on a USB stick, and mail it to you.
Wow. Okay.
I would suggest that you use BitTorrent for the download, because it will interrupt itself and start back up, cleanly. I mean, it's meant to download from many things. So an interrupted download won't have to start from scratch. And then, I would try your Starbucks or whatever your, McDonald's or whatever your poison is, and just, while you're frequenting those places, just let her rip. And they don't care. I mean, you may consume more bandwidth than the average person, but the nice thing about Wi-Fi is it's sort of self-limiting. So you're not going to soak a gig connection on their Wi-Fi. And if you do, it's probably kind of their fault for letting you do so. So I wouldn't feel bad about going wherever, as long as you're, spending money. That's why they offer it, is they know people need bandwidth, and it gets people in the door.
Yep.
How long do you think it would take on a Starbucks or
on my fast connection, it doesn't take long at all to download 2 gigs. I just did it. And it didn't, I walked away and came back and it was done. So if they have like a gig, and you're getting most of it or a fair line share of it, it's probably going to get done, during a decent meal. Maybe if it's Starbucks, you might have to get a sandwich. But I don't think it's a big deal.
What about a public library, Pete?
Yeah, you can go to Fairview Library. Fairview
That's a
Library.
really good idea. Yes.
You download it to a thumb drive yourself easily. They don't have, you can use Wi-Fi there, but you don't need to use Wi-Fi. They have great computers in the Buncombe County libraries.
That you can use? Or,
Yes. Anybody
Okay.
with a library card can just log in and do everything you want to do. You know,
It's a
download
really
it.
good idea because we have a good library down here also for an Indina. But that's gonna okay. I'm gonna try that first before I bug Dan to
Okay.
send.
But, yeah, my speed is about 370 megabits per second down. So I've got BitTorrent client as well. So I don't have any problem downloading 2 gigs.
Really, that's fantastic. That's a different world than I'm used to.
Yeah, and definitely like if you're downloading something like Mint, their servers are like crazy fast. Even if you just do a straight download, but if you're downloading something a little more fringe, BitTorrent, like if you try to download from the official repo
Right.
for like some fringe Linux, it's going to be slow. But if you go to BitTorrent, it's going to be much, much faster.
Yeah.
Okay.
Has anybody tried Ventoy, by the way? Played with Ventoy?
I did.
You have? Do you know I've got 56 Linux distributions on my USB stick? I can spin up the thing and it'll go to the Ventoy menu and I can pick from one of 56 different distributions to play with it.
Wow.
I messed with it several years ago, and there was one or two. I had like 5 or 6 on a stick, and 1 or 2 of them would load properly, and then the others I couldn't get to load properly. So I don't know. But after a point, it's just it doesn't. It's meaning. I mean, if you, once you decide on a distro to use, then that kind of becomes meaningless. So I haven't even messed with Ventoy in quite a while.
Yeah.
Is that it for you, Pete?
Yeah, that's about it.
Well, thanks so much. Gene, what else you got going on?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, was sorry to miss last month's meeting, but I did watch it. Thanks, Dan, for recording. And I was up in D.C. I've got son and daughter-in-law and grandkids up there. And I could have probably managed it, but there were other things going on, so I just didn't want to mess around with that. I'm it's tax season, so I've got a couple of things that I have to do for taxes, and I was just so thankful the other day that I have used Linux now for 15 years or so, because in the old days I could never get a good backup from Windows. And of course now, if you were still hanging on to Windows XP or something like that, you're out of the loop for Windows. So I don't even know if you could retrieve your data from a backup off of an XP backup or not, if you're using the current version. But I don't know that you could or couldn't. But I do know that, oops, I died.
You're there.
Yep. Did I die?
No.
Okay. So I was thankful that I've still got the same home directory now that I had.
Now he died.
Now you're dead.
There he goes.
Keep breathing. Keep breathing.
Breathe, Gene, breathe.
He's goner.
He's gone. Flatline.
Well, I think we can wait for a couple minutes since we have double Gene.
Double Gene, yeah.
Sorry about that.
And I think Rusty disrupted Gene.
Yeah, I think he did. He blew him out of the water.
Okay.
Well, anyway, that was pretty much all. I was able to get some tax documents from 2010, so 13 years ago, that I'd done that were stored in my home directory on an older machine. So anyway, thank goodness for Linux.
Is that it for you, Gene?
Pretty much.
Alan, what you got going on?
Right. Okay, now I unmuted. Been doing several things. Our cameras, our IP cameras up at Mount Mitchell have been freezing over. It gets water on them, and then the lens, or you can't see through the lens because there's ice on them. So we bought a heated enclosure, and the heater comes on when the temperature drops below 40 degrees. And then it's got a fan that comes on if temperature gets above 104 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's got a little wiper on the glass on the front of the camera. My problem is that is using the wiper feature. It uses RS-285, which is a serial protocol. And the camera I have does not support that. So I'm trying to figure out how to use another device, whether it's an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi, that where I can program to control the wiper. But anyway, I've been working on that, and the only other computer-related stuff that I've been doing is I read a fascinating series of articles in Wired magazine called "The Hunt for the Dark Web's Biggest Kingpin," and this is about a law enforcement crackdown on the dark web, and they actually managed to determine the IP address of somebody who was running the Alpha Bay marketplace on the dark web, where they were selling all kinds of guns and narcotics and other illegal stuff. Fascinating read. I highly recommend it. And that series of articles is actually an excerpt from a book called Tracers in the Dark, The Global Hunt for the Crime Lords of Cryptocurrency by Andy Greenberg. And that's available on Amazon. Fascinating read if anybody wants to read about the dark web and that sort of thing. And that's about it.
What was the name of the series? The Hunt for the Dark Webs?
Yeah, if you go to wired.com, and however, the problem with that is you're going to run into Wired's paywall, where they keep popping up stuff asking you to subscribe.
Okay.
So what I might do is I actually have a physical copy of the magazine, and
Right.
I may just Xerox the 16 pages in the article, and I may do that, and I could share that if you wish. But or you may just want to read the book, The Hunt for the Dark, Tracers in the Dark.
Treasures in the Dark.
Tracers, yes.
Tracers, T-R-A.
Very interesting how they caught this guy, and very clever police work, and it gets pretty in depth into the Tor browser and cryptocurrencies and how they cracked the digital wallets, and they were the cryptocurrencies are not totally invulnerable to tracing who the owner of that wallet is, or at least their IP address. Anyway, I enjoyed it, and I thought if anybody is interested in cryptocurrencies and the dark web, it's worth pursuing.
Yeah, Alan, I have two different extensions in my Chrome browser for defeating paywalls, and I could not defeat the paywall on that particular site. I don't know why. I mean, because I look at New York Times and Wall Street Journal and all that through their paywalls because I don't subscribe to either one of those. But for that particular website, I could not defeat it. So, do you
Well,
have
I
any?
think they're offering a $5 electronic subscription, and
Oh, are they?
Wired has a lot of good articles. It may be worth the $5 uh,
Cheaper than
or
the book.
yeah, much cheaper than the book, but the book is longer and it's. But let me ask you this: in regard to my outdoor IP camera enclosure and the RS-485 serial protocol. Does anybody have a suggestion on how I may be able to use a Raspberry Pi to communicate using that protocol so I can turn the wiper feature? It's like a windshield wiper.
Yeah.
How I can turn that on and off using my Raspberry Pi.
The guy that knows the answer to that just left, Ed Comer.
Okay.
That's what he uses when he builds all these weirdo circuits that he builds. Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. So maybe you can get.
All right, that's all I got to say.
Thanks, Alan. Rusty, what do you have going on this month?
He's muted.
Crickets.
Cricket.
If you're talking, Rusty, you are still muted.
Rusty.
Let's move on to Leander. We'll come back to Rusty.
Hello, is this not a lot this month. Just work has been crushing. I just saw your email, Brent. I've literally been like, I've got like 500 emails in my mailbox I haven't answered yet. That's just past month has just been work crazy and like trying to catch up on stuff around the house. Not a lot of tech stuff going on. I good get caught up on some yard stuff. Finally finished working on my got the last bit of my walkway pavers in. So I've got to I've got them into the yard. I've got to put them down. Got the yeah, it's just been crazy. I it feels like this month just went got sucked out the window. So yeah, I guess I did upgrade my Linux laptop to Fedora 38 beta. Ran to an odd bug with I still run X11 on that because of color calibration that doesn't work in Wayland. And when you had start an X session, and it would just crash out. Did some troubleshooting, added a second user account. That worked okay. So I finally went into decomp and did a deconf, reset the GNOME settings, and my X session started working. So I don't know what the original thing there is. I mean, we're talking, it's beta, so who knows? But other than that, GNOME 44 seems to be working. I've run across a few packages that don't compile with GCC 13. GCC 13 made some changes, so I switched to compiling with LLVM and a couple of things. But mainly just at work, we're preparing HPC stuff, so I've been busy with that. You've got two biologists who requested 31 programs be compiled and installed with varying dependencies and stuff, and a couple of them actually need to be running Docker, and so then you're trying to teach PhDs how to run Docker, and that's always a challenge because they already know everything, so why anyway? But yeah, so that's kind of been my day. or a month. Yeah, sorry. I know Brent, you sent me an email. I've just been like, I get home and fall asleep on the couch so when I get in, so I haven't had a chance to check much of that. But yeah, that's been kind of my month in a nutshell. I guess I'll pass the thing on to other people.
All right. The list is getting short. Let's see if Rusty can unmute now.
Negative.
Maybe Rusty went to the loo. All right. Well, I guess that leaves me. I do have a few things, not much. Been kind of a light month for Linux, although it did occur to me that when someone mentioned Zorin, that I had a very similar need, and I might actually revisit Zorin, depending if I have time. My in-laws moved, and after the move, never brought their computer back alive, and then they basically asked me to try to rehabilitate it. It runs Windows, of course, Windows 7 on an old Dell that I gave them. That was an old work computer that I had for testing. That was taken off the books, and they told me to do whatever with. So I was not able to rehabilitate Windows on there, nor was I particularly interested in getting a unsupported Windows version working, and nor is it capable of running a modern Windows version well. So I'm like, well, I got to put something on here if they want it. And so I started looking around, like, what are the lighter versions? Tried something called Linux Lite and ran into some sort of Debian installer issue that I guess is a known issue that I did not feel like fighting. So I'm like, well, if this isn't going to just work, I'm just going to try something else. So I put Mint Mate on there, and that worked very well. Seems to be performing well enough, so that might be the way to go. But if Zorin is something that is Windows user friendly, maybe I'll give that a go. So I'll probably, after this meeting, if I have time, download that, slap that on there, slap on Solitaire and the things that my father-in-law likes to do. He's actually fairly, in the last several months, been relegated to a wheelchair due to some declines in his condition. So hopefully that will give him some additional comfort. He's a big fan of his tablet, but I think there are some things that you can't as easily do on a tablet that he might enjoy having his old computer semi-functional. So there's that. One thing, Linux has kind of been on the decline at work, and the reason for that is I'm the Linux guy. No one else has stepped up to be a Linux guy. So, like, when I make the decision of, like, should this be on Linux or something else, I've been largely avoiding that. There are some things that we are still doing on Linux. And in fact, my Linux DNS server that offers, not that you can't do this in Windows, but it offers different views for different things. It found another problem to solve. So it is doing more stuff. So for the handful of things we are doing Linux for, I'm starting to get more people involved in the management of them, because I can't be the only guy who fixes X, Y, or Z. That's not a recipe for success. So one of the things Linux does is I run a little postfix server, which is the gatekeeper for SMTP for internal servers. So I don't just allow everything to send to Exchange and then on out. I have a SMTP server where I perform basically an ACL check. Allowed nets is referenced, so that some IPs have access, some don't. That can be done in Exchange, but it's much more straightforward to configure on this little Linux server. So I've written a little SOP so that my coworkers on the security team can field these requests, because there's several requests of this sort that only can come to me, and I'm frankly just getting sick of that. And I don't want to be on call for the rest of my life, because I've pretty much been on call some portion of the time for my entire professional life, sometimes 100% of the time, which is not a good thing. So that's where things are going. It's like I'm not always going to preferentially choose Linux unless there's people who solve it, or it's just 100% the best tool for the job. And where I'm using Linux, I'm getting other folks into the thing. My virtual box on my Linux machine is great, still serving the purpose of housing. Right now, it's just got one Linux client machine, a Windows, because I'm on I'm basically on the network because I have this Aruba remote access point that essentially places me on the corporate network, which is great. But sometimes I have to be a fully remote client, and for that I use a Windows 10 host that is on VirtualBox on my Linux machine, my home machine. So it is not using that remote access point, and it allows me to test various things as if I were remote, or it just gives me another client when I'm trying to do like an install or something, and I've already tested it on the one machine I do have. I can do that or spin up even more clients, and it's nice to having a place where you can just clone and create clients at will. And something that happened last night that is kind of interesting, that folks might find interesting, is the website for my work, the marketing website, the main website for the domain, www.nahealth.com, it went down. And I got the postmortem today from the vendor, because that is fairly recently gone. But tickets came to me because the people that used to support the site apparently are still monitoring the site, even though they're not running it. So poor communication there for whatever reason. But I got some emails last night of, hey, we get on the VPN to fix this? I'm like, you guys don't fix this anymore. But it got me in the loop, which is probably good, because I think I put the right people in touch with the right people to get it fixed. But the postmortem came in the email today. And one of the reasons it went down was, the reason it went down was memory exhaustion. And one of those reasons is scans from all over the world, a elevated amount of activity due to scanning. Previously, when I had been responsible for the networking for this, we had it geofenced to just the United States and Canada. I talked to marketing, and they said, yeah, that's fine. US, because most things I just allow from US, but they're like, hey, can we do Canada too? And I'm like, sure, it's Canada. They're nice, right? So we're allowing just US and Canada. And they were saying that they were seeing scans primarily from Brazil, Germany, Hong Kong, India, Japan, Panama, Poland, Singapore, and Ukraine. So I'm going to suggest to them, hey, instead of blocking those, why don't we just go back to just allowing the United States and Canada, and take that approach, because that seemed to work well for us. Yeah, I have my own levels of memory exhaustion, Leander. One of which was when this VPN request first came in. I myself had completely forgotten that we had moved this to the web. So I'm like, sure, yeah, I'll get you back on the VPN. And it's like, and then I got him back on the VPN. I'm like, wait, you guys don't do this anymore. It finally hit me, and I blamed that I was half asleep, but I truly just had forgotten. Anyway, so that's the stuff that I have going on in the Linux world, which is not much. But I'm hoping that Rusty is now able to talk to us.
I finally found the mute button. I thought I had to activate my cell on the matrix that has all the on a mobile phone, it has just the initials of each party, and somehow I couldn't get into my party, but it's all at the bottom. And anyway, there's just not enough screen space on a mobile phone to tell you what you're doing. So news, I'm just treading water on every project, from the physical projects to trying to configure software to do what I hope is best. Examples like what I just posted of feeling one day that I just was tired of my scroll mouse, my scroll wheel going too slow. And thankfully, just with a little search and reading, I installed this IM wheel layer of control that I can manually call up through as a console command, and I will then eventually have to put it in my startup routines. But it's just so nice to tweak something with the help of, the search tools that offer guidance. And I compare it to being in your shop and just getting to choose how you make a jig and use a certain shop tool. Your jig is probably going to be like anybody else's jig, plus or minus preferences. But it's so nice to just know that particularly it's so nice to know that there are tracks that have been left by previous people who have the skill to solve the problem and leave a polite, kind note for others. Because as I said in my last post, I'm sort of a copycat, and without search, I wouldn't be able to find who to copy. Anyway, I'm treading water. The next venture for the coming month, I'm going to see what a cell phone network router. I don't know what you call this thing. It's basically a cell phone that never gets used on the road, but dials up and connects as a cell and automatically fires up its hotspot to communicate with your laptop or whatever other device. And what I'll be interested to find out is whether or not it's treated as a cell phone that has a running hotspot, or whether this is transparent, whether in other words, will it have a throttled hotspot, or will its automatic hotspot, will it be detected and throttled by my provider, or will it be just sort of transparent? I guess the question comes down to whether it's treated like a proxy server that is just passing packets, or are the packets pre-labeled by the software as being from another device identity on the network? But I'm not sure. I'll be on the lookout for some console tools that can tell me where the traffic is being consolidated. If it's a proxy server, then all the packets should probably be treated equal. That is, or should I say, they should not be identified by any status on the local network. But I'm kind of out of my league in that area. That's going to be the learning curve for the coming month.
Well,
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brent.
I'm just curious that I may have missed precisely what you said this device is. Is this something you bought through your provider, or is this something that you acquired, like, secondarily, that uses like a SIM card or something like that?
Right. I believe it is the equivalent of an unlocked cell phone that is sort of joined at the hip to a router. It's got 4 antenna, 2 to receive and 2 to operate the local area network, the LAN. But it's called an LTE 4G Wi-Fi router. So it will accept a SIM card and be, so hopefully, I haven't tried it yet, but hopefully it will accept the SIM card and be treated like an ordinary cell phone. And hopefully all of the packets going to the wider area network will be perceived as being just the cell phone. In other words, I guess only the cell phone or only this device knows where the packets are supposed to go when they arrive. So it's going to send the packets out, and internally, somehow it's going to have a record to know where the packets go when for packets coming down. This device hopefully will know where things go.
From a networking perspective, it's really no different than just any home router. It's just performing network address translation. It's not actually a proxy per se. I mean, it could be, but I doubt it. It's not proxying to traffic. It's not terminating the connection, creating a new connection. It is just translating the addresses. It's being the default gateway of its own little network, and then translating the addresses to the public network, or perhaps another private network, or depending on what it's connecting to, or maybe even an IPv6 network, depending on your provider. But again, it's really networking no different than that guy back there. So yeah, I think it's reasonable to expect that your provider is going to be kind of unaware of the activity, other than that, some providers, you may throttle you pretty heavily once you get to a certain level of usage, because it is a lot easier to consume large amounts of data on say a monthly basis with a hotspot than it is on an actual phone.
Yeah, well, I have an extra line, which is a phablet. That is, it's a phone tablet, but I have never gotten an Android tablet to behave enough like an ordinary laptop. It's perceived as a mobile device, and therefore the way the installed browser works in peculiar ways, and I think even what is offered by the website is based upon it knowing that it's sending something to a mobile device, and it doesn't care whether it has a big screen like a tablet. It treats it as if it were a small cell phone, and so I think this really affects. I would use my phablet more if it wasn't bound to being a mobile device. So this is my stab at trying to use that extra phone line with a laptop so that I can at least, I may still be cursed and stuck with the identity of being a mobile device with this thing, or but it seems to me that my browser on the laptop is at least able to identify itself as a real workstation rather than as a mobile device. So the bottom line is I can't really use a phone tablet like a real computer, and so I'm going to try to see if the SIM card will work in this other device. I'll start out by just plugging it in and see what kind of trouble that causes. So that's my agenda for the coming month.